Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of From No Crypto to No Crypto. I'm your host, the crypto coach, Blockchain Wayne. Today we're joined by Pelli Wang. Now, Pelli is with Bracket Labs, and we're definitely going to jump in and find out what Bracket Labs is doing. But Pelli, first and foremost, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Wayne, for having me.
Awesome. I've been looking forward to this. I've pulled up the website for Bracket Labs and kind of did a deep dive over the last week and have some questions there. But before we jump into what's Bracket Labs and what you guys are doing there, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Absolutely. So I've been working in crypto since 2017, but really my background, I came from both the finance and tech world. I started my career on Wall Street, working at an investment bank, and did a lot of big institutional deals. But over time, I kind of found that a lot of the tools that we used on Wall Street were very basic. Most of it was just, using Excel, meeting with clients, doing deals, pretty old fashioned. And I was really interested in sort of figuring out ways to use technology to make, some of our deals happen faster. And so that's sort of how I bridged over to the tech world, got started in startups. One of my first companies, Seed Invest, was the first online investment platform, really crowdfunding for early stage startups, which back in 2013, 10 years ago, was not as big as it was now. And so that was really a great sort of entryway into venture capital. And I worked with a lot of different startups at the time. And Seed Invest ended up being sold to Circle, which is one of the biggest stablecoin companies in the US. And from there, I moved over to ConsenSys, which was, the commercial arm of Ethereum. So we were a venture studio. We built a lot of the early, key infrastructure products that live on Ethereum, like MetaMask, for instance, a lot of the infrastructure tools like Infura, and really helped onboard people on, sort of into the Ethereum ecosystem. And from there, I left to start another company called Deer Creek. It's a consulting and advisory firm. So we worked with a lot of the newer blockchains. After Ethereum, there are a number of layer twos, other chains that have different consensus mechanisms, and really try to, find other ways to make blockchain more usable for the entire ecosystem. And about a year and a half ago, we were very involved in DeFi. We saw that DeFi, had some really good primitives, but in the derivative space, we saw that there was still a lot of challenges. And so that was sort of the inspiration and sort of genesis behind Bracket Labs.
Awesome. So, I always like to find that question, how did somebody transition into this space? And it seems like you just followed the tech, and the tech led you to where you were fully, inserted into this space, just through the acquisition from Circle and then ConsenSys. So how has that transition been?
Yeah, I think, with any startup and any company, there's the tech side, where you're working with like the engineers, the CTO, and they're kind of like always going after the next hot thing, right? So blockchain has been around since 2008, but really started to only pick up, I would say, in the last 5-6 years, right? Yeah. And there's different waves, in sort of technology. Right now, everyone is really hot on AI, and that's kind of the big topic that everyone's talking about. But it takes some time before, I guess, the rust, like it becomes mainstream, right? And I think that was one of the big challenges with blockchain in the early days, is that it's so different than how people are used to transacting, right? Like the thought of holding tokens or having a self-custody wallet, that never really existed, right? No one had ever thought of holding money outside of just having, like dollar bills or money in your wallet, like no one has ever thought of like, hey, let's hold a large sum of capital outside of a bank. And I think that's still a concept that people are, getting more comfortable. And as fintech apps start to, like I think people are now like comfortable with using their phone with Apple Pay and Google Pay, like just using that as the main way to pay for things. There's starting to be a lot more experimentation and people feeling comfortable doing that all online.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're right. I think as we see this technology evolve, it's going to be simple interfaces that make it easier to use. That's one of the things I've said for years is, yes, we need education in the space because there's a lot of things like there's no comparative. There's nothing to compare it to like, oh, this is just an improvement on this. It's something completely different. But there are user interfaces that we can add to make it super simple and easy for people to use, reduce some friction to where they don't even realize that they're using the technology, but we know the benefits of utilizing it.
Yeah, so a really good, I guess, story back from when we were starting Seed Invest. We had people that were investing from lots of different locations, not just the U.S., but also internationally. And having people send money to our, bank account was really, really challenging because everyone, didn't really understand, the one, like, within the US, they said, oh, like, can we use a credit card? We didn't accept credit cards, in the beginning for kind of like big venture investments. We had, to accept cash. And so they had to use wires and ACHs. And then on top of that, for international customers, they were sending, euros or other currencies, and they had an FX component to it. So it was a operation nightmare. And I wish, back then, if we had stablecoin or, some sort of payment standard, it would make it so much easier to process. So, that's just some of the things that I'm really excited about for crypto in the future. And, I think that's starting to, we're starting to see some momentum on that front as well.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's jump into Bracket Labs. Let's dive into that. And, 2 questions for you. I'll let you pick which order to go in. But obviously, what is Bracket Labs? But also the origin story. Like, how did that come about?
Yeah. So I'll start from the origin story. I think that's always interesting. So. I think, again, going back to my background, I did a lot in finance and then started doing a lot more on the tech world. And being, in crypto from, the really, really early days, I saw there were a lot of different products being, kind of promoted on exchanges. And as we ran into problems with exchanges and a lot of, the problems with FTX and the other centralized lenders, people started to look at sort of DeFi products. And that was starting to sort of bridge over. But the products being offered in DeFi were either really clunky or really, really complex. And a lot of it was just, kind of like in the early days, people using swaps to just, trade between like Ethereum and a stable coin or Ethereum and, the newest altcoin or like meme coin, which is, kind of like the basics, right? You need to have swaps, spot swaps ready. And then you kind of build more complex products on top. And the next product that we saw were perps. So that was a way to sort of speculate on the future price of, Bitcoin or Ethereum, whatnot, sort of in the future. And that was a really, really huge product. It was very successful. There's a lot of different products that have done really well in the last few years. But then in the option space, we know that that's a huge market in traditional finance, but there wasn't really any products that took off. And I think with options, one, it's really complex, right? The way that it's built in traditional finance, there's strike prices, there's all these like confusing Greek letters, there's, a margin account. And we knew that that was not going to be usable for regular people in DeFi. Like, it's too much to sort of set up. You're not going to be able to compete with a centralized exchange. And so we kind of set out and we're like, okay, that's kind of the next frontier, is to really try to take a really hard product and simplify it so that it's, one, usable for people, that it's fun, but also that it's actually usable on DeFi. Because DeFi, there's a lot of complexities where you can't do super complex things on Ethereum because the gas costs become astronomical, and you have to change certain parameters, like having to quickly update price all the time doesn't work when, all of a sudden Ethereum shoots up in price, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be able to track that. So those are some of the parameters that we set out to solve, and that was sort of the sort of inspiration behind wanting to do something for Bracket. And over the last year, we've come out with different iterations. Most recently, last month, we launched testnet for a new product called Passage, which is our take on basically a volatility market, right? So we know in crypto, volatility is usually very high, but when we look at the data, there's actually only spikes of like huge volatility moments, right?
Right.
For most of this year, ETH and Bitcoin were really in a channel, right? It was kind of like trading sideways. And then all of a sudden, like the last 2 weeks with BlackRock and the ETF story, it would spike up. And then it kind of trades in a channel again. And then there's another story and then it spikes up. And that's really kind of the trading history over the last few years. As there's more people and the market caps of all these assets get bigger, you're going to see less crazy, like 100x or, like these huge spikes. They start to become much more modular. So that's kind of the idea around range-bound derivatives. And that's what we're kind of building right now.
Yeah, I was glad to see that, because that's one thing I think most people don't zoom out or examine the chart enough to see that. All they think is, oh, crypto is so volatile. But you're right. I mean, when you look at it, that volatility is usually in short periods of time. And outside of that, we're pretty much range bound. And, historically, I mean, I know one guy that's strictly his trading strategy, and it can be very profitable. Obviously, the more indicators you use, the better, but that's something that can definitely help you when you zoom out to see the big picture.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think the idea behind Passage is not for someone to like do a zillion like computations, right? Like, you don't want to like have to pull out like an Excel sheet or Google sheet and like try to calculate, those numbers. We wanted to just make it easy for someone, usually because they have a sense over the next 2 days. That's typically, we're playing in more of the short range of the derivative sort of term. So you have sort of a sense of, hey, in the next 2 days, do I think that volatility is going to be high, or do I think volatility is going to be low? And we try to make that decision-making process really simple. And you can see it really easily in a chart. And that should make it a much more fun, trading experience. And, right now we're starting with sort of the big assets, but in the future, one of the things that we're excited about is using this model to go after other types of assets that people, kind of want to trade.
Yeah, so you can apply that to any asset that is tokenized, either now or in the future. Is that correct?
Yeah, for sure. So we use an Oracle, we use Chainlink to track the price of Bitcoin, for instance. So you don't necessarily need to own Bitcoin to basically bet on its volatility.
Okay.
And so, in the future, if tokenized stocks or other tokenized commodities, if those become popular, then we can basically make these products for those assets.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds like a really nice tool. And so, like on Passage,
Mhm.
is someone basically either betting on the breakout or the stay in range type mentality? Is that what it is?
Yeah, for sure. So I think there's really just two, we tried to make it boil everything down into two decisions. So if you think that volatility is going to be sideways or relatively low, then you take in the break-in side. And then if you think,
Mm,
that it's going to be high vol, like right now, I think a lot of people are kind of speculating, is the ETF, the Bitcoin ETF, I think there's a window of 7 days. And so people think that, is it going to get approved? And, if that's baked in to the price, then they might take the breakout side.
gotcha. Yeah,
Yeah.
makes sense. Makes sense. Awesome. Now, I saw something also when I was exploring, looking in the bracket.
Mhm.
There was an event with Binance this past summer. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Binance, we were one of the uh, projects accepted in their season 5 incubator. So Binance Labs, they basically select from thousands of projects, and they help incubate them. In their incubator to build the product. Think about token models, go to market strategies,
Hmm.
marketing, and they've been a huge help. One, because they sit really at the intersection of where traders are, right? And people always go to them, trade the newest tokens, but also they have a lot of different products on BNB chain. And so they were really supportive, going in that direction for derivatives, because again, they know that derivatives is a huge space. There's not as many new products being launched in that category. So
Mm.
we were really happy to work with them, to have their marketing support, their ecosystem support. And even though, of course, when we first launched, we were on the Arbitrum blockchain, which is an
Hmm.
L2. And, we have plans in the future to also launch on BNB because we know there's a lot of traders on that chain, and we're excited to work, on that partnership with Binance.
Nice. Yeah, I'm familiar. We went through the Binance Labs process. I think it was almost 4 years ago. So
Oh, wow.
it's really exciting to see. And also,
Yeah.
just recently, I think it was maybe last week or so, or
Mhm.
recently, I was in Turkey at the Binance Blockchain Week in
Yep.
Istanbul, and CZ had made a comment that was trending online quite a bit, really just talking about the future. I forgot the exact wording, but in essence, they're betting heavily on decentralized um, infrastructure more than
Yeah.
centralized. Obviously, centralized exchanges onboard a lot of people to crypto, but they see the future is in Web3, DeFi, and so that's where they're putting their efforts, which would
Hmm.
definitely be a reason for them to see what Bracket Labs is doing and definitely want to
Yeah.
participate in that. So that's
Yeah.
exciting to see.
I think the cool thing, we're seeing sort of these hybrid models where it's hard for DeFi to get all the regulatory licenses, in all the different
Hmm.
jurisdictions. So you use the centralized exchange because they're already live in all these countries. That helps with onboarding customers, and then they basically allow people to go into kind of a self custody wallet. Binance owns uh, Trust Wallet. So that's a good way to sort of, get into other apps, or it doesn't matter. You can use any other, wallet.
Hmm.
But from the wallet, it's really your gateway to kind of the newest products. And I think it's hard for exchanges to sort of experiment as fast as DeFi. So that's where you're really going to see like the newest, latest stuff. And I think that's a good, partnership. It's a good sort of like way to discover what could be really hot, and if it works, then they could slowly integrate that into their exchange.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing that really impresses me when you see something like that, because I've seen that I've talked to people with Binance, and I've talked to people also with Coinbase here in the US. And both of those, they're focused on building their Web3 infrastructure. Coinbase with their Coinbase wallet and decentralized protocols. Binance has been focusing heavily on decentralized protocols that can just really enhance the chain. So, and it's good to see as more and more people start to understand the benefits of self-sovereign ownership, being able to control their assets, not having to put all of your trust into one entity. Rich, you're right. You alluded to that earlier when we were talking about the FTX and just what's happened with FTX and other exchanges, where that really wasn't a cryptocurrency problem. That was just a corruption and centralization problem, to where you have one person or a group of a few people in control of millions of users' assets, and that creates what we've seen. And I think this technology can solve a lot of those problems if we make it easier for people to use. We tell people all the time, don't leave your asset on exchanges, take control, take custody, right? Why do they leave it there? Because it's easy and having simple interface. And it seems like your team at Bracket Labs is really focused on just simple user interfaces. Would that be a correct statement?
Yeah, for sure. I'm someone that's really active in DeFi. So, I'm always, whenever there's something that's like a new concept or category that's launched, I'm always testing it, just again, being in the space for a long time. I see a lot of different projects, and, it helps me get new ideas for where we're going as Bracket, but also, everything is very composable. So you can, really partner with some of the newest ideas. And I find that a lot of, a good percentage of founders want to make it really, really complex, because they think, making it super complex means that we're a more defensible protocol. It's harder for other people to figure out. But I actually think that's the opposite. As a user, like, I don't want to
I agree.
read your white paper to figure out like what the heck, your token does. And there's like, 3 different steps, and I don't want to do that. So I want it to be really simple, really useful, and, sort of something that I can quickly use like on the fly, either on my phone, on my computer. I think that's simple is the way to go.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you on that one. It has to be a simple process. And I think so many times, a lot of founders, and not all the time, but a lot of founders and some of these tech innovation projects are there. In many cases, their background is as a developer, an engineer. And so they're basically very focused on the complexities, and I don't want to say, I guess you could say they underestimate the importance of making things super easy to use. Like I always go back and I compare past technologies, right? I don't think the iPhone is the most advanced phone on the market today, but what's the one thing that's got it such appeal and notoriety is how simple it is for most people to just pick up and start using.
Yeah, I agree. I think, even with the iPhone, there's like all these like features that are built in, and other people say, oh, like you can, add this new keyboard, and you're just like, oh, wow, like I had no idea that you had all these other capabilities, right? It's crazy how fast technology is advancing. And I think that's the hard part if you're trying to appeal to a lot of people, is there's so much information. There's only so much that someone can sort of absorb, in your project. I mean, there's just almost too much news happening 24/7. So you have literally like 30 seconds or 60 seconds to like get your product across. And if it takes, someone with a PhD and like 30 minutes to read your white paper, it's just not going to fly.
Yeah, that is absolutely. I mean, that's a great point. That is so true. I mean, and that's not just in this space. I mean, that's tech in general, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And, I mentioned, sort of the AI wave. And I'm not even up to snuff on everything that's happening there because there's so many new
It's hard.
projects getting funded. And so, they're like, oh, these like huge algorithms and like machine learning models. And that's, like way too advanced for me. I don't have time to like, like research into that. So, props to anyone that can stay on top of like all this stuff. I always, like, I kind of follow like Elon Musk and I'm like, oh my gosh, like he's running 5 different companies at the same time doing, really, really complex technical stuff. I don't know how he's able to stay on top of everything.
Yeah, I'm sure he's definitely got around the right people, but that's a different level for than most people. I could say that, but yeah, it's definitely evolving fast, and most people don't care about all the intricacies, right? Is it how can I use even the large language models? How can that benefit me? And you make it something as simple as plug and play, open up an application, I can use it, it solves a problem I need, or it improves a process I'm doing already. I don't care if it's AI, I don't care if it's blockchain. I just care, hey, it made my life easier or more secure or one of those aspects without making things more complicated. Because you're right, we're in a fast-paced world already. Not many people have the time to sit down and say, okay, let me figure out what this is and how to use it. Awesome. So Pelli, as we start to wrap up, one last thing, I don't know if you want to touch on at all. You kind of touched on it for a second, but global DeFi regulation. Being that Bracket Labs is in this space, what do you see coming in terms of the regulations for DeFi globally? I know it's kind of a balancing act between don't stifle innovation and have be able to meet certain jurisdictions requirements, I guess you could say.
Yeah, for sure. I will say that regulations are very uneven across the globe, and there are certain places, for instance, in Asia where we see like Hong Kong, certain jurisdictions trying to come up with new regulations that fit with Web3, right? A lot of the regulations in the US and, the crypto industry has really complained is that like, the SEC and some of the security regulations are made, 80 years ago. And they don't really fit with sort of what blockchain and the decentralized nature and the global nature, how it operates. And so I think overall the industry is welcoming of regulation, but they also, I think they want to work with regulators to say, hey, these are the things that I'm doing. We're not trying to be scammy or try to steal user funds. Like we're trying to build a new, financial infrastructure and guardrails for people to use, because back in the day people didn't necessarily have to like transact with foreign countries, right? Like you kind of just operated like in the US, you had your business, you sold, everyone used US dollar. You didn't have to think about shooting money to Europe or to Australia or Africa and the Middle East and whatnot. And people want things to happen instantaneously, right? Like that's kind of the beauty of global business. It's always on, it's 24/7. And stablecoins, for instance, can solve some of those issues. I think a lot of DeFi is trying to think of like, hey, if we're in this 24/7 trading environment, how can that work for lending and borrowing, or how can that work for derivatives? So that's, I think that's sort of where the industry is today. Over the next 2 years, there's a lot of these regulations, like for instance, in Europe with the virtual asset service provider, VAS licenses, the MiCA licenses, those will all start to unfold. And I think these regulations will start to harmonize. So I think in the next 3 years, there'll be much clearer regulation. And I think that actually will help the DeFi industry grow bigger, because a lot more bigger institutions will feel comfortable transacting, and you'll see more volume come online.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. In my early days of studying Bitcoin, I was always an advocate that we don't need governing bodies to come in and try to regulate this. And that's true to certain aspects. But if we want more people to participate in a global field, and like you mentioned, those institutional players, a lot of them, they want to get involved, but they're waiting on some type of clarity on what they can and can't do and how they can operate. And once they get that, then you're going to see really a boom that everybody's going to benefit. So that's why I always look for or hope for a light touch regulation in terms of don't stifle innovation, but definitely get it to where it can follow existing regulations or update your regulations. As you mentioned, yes, some of those are very old in terms of what they were designed for.
Yeah.
And I think we see that, then everybody's going to benefit, not just the large institutions, but anybody that's wanting to participate, they'll have, it'll be better access, I feel.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that, again, that's partially why people feel excitement around the ETF, because, before it's kind of like, oh, like, how do you own Bitcoin? Well, you have to go to an exchange and then do KYC and then, hook up your bank account and send money in, there's 5 steps to do that. And most people are, not the most active. So they don't want to go through all those steps. They already have their bank account. Most people don't want to keep, moving funds back and forth. And I think that's going to be, I think that's going to be a big impetus for people, at least to learn more about it. You have to take baby steps. You're like, oh, this is really neat. And then maybe I'll try to experiment and, own it outright. But in the beginning, you have to make it easy for people.
Absolutely. Cool. All right, Pelli, it's definitely been a pleasure and honor to have you on today. So let's maybe share with the audience, how can they find out more about Bracket Labs?
Sure. So we're active on all social media platforms. The best way is to follow us at Bracket_labs_ on Twitter or X. But you can find all of that information on our website, which is bracketx.fi. And you can follow us. We have a lot of really cool stuff happening. We're going on mainnet soon in December, and we'll have a lot of really exciting programs to promote that. So
awesome. Looking forward to seeing that. Definitely encourage everybody to follow them, give them a follow, and go on their website, follow them on social media, different platforms, and keep up with what's going on there. It looks like your team is definitely leading the way in a way that I really appreciate, making things simple and easy for people. That there's too much complexity, not just in this space, but in finance in general, and being able to streamline that is very important. So, Pelli, thanks again for joining us today. Any final words before we part?
No, again, I think what you're doing is really critical and important. Again, it's just to educate people on why, cryptocurrency is an exciting space to be in. Being able to self-custody your own funds is a really important concept, and hopefully more people get excited about this space and come in. So thank you for doing that work.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you. All right, that's it, everyone. Thanks again for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.